communion, to be together. And I'm here to talk about communication when it involves people who have dementia. That's a pertinent topic for most of you. You know how so often you don't feel together. You'll explain something, they say, yes, I promise, they will not leave the house. And 5 minutes after you leave, they're out the door. And you think, but I know they understood. I know this person well enough to know they understood. Why did that happen? So I do want to talk about communication and about dementia. And the term you often hear is person-centered. And what that means is to keep in mind that person. Because some of the things I'll say today doesn't have anything to do with the person you know. But can we make it, could I come up with some general information that would apply to most everybody with dementia? And we'll see how successful I am. So I want to look at it from the perspective of the person who has dementia. I want to talk about barriers to that communion, barrier to the communication, what gets in the way. And then also, how do we then, what are we gonna do about it? To break down those barriers. Here's a quote from someone who has Alzheimer's disease. He said, I think one of the worst things about Alzheimer's disease is you're so alone with it. Nobody around you really knows what's going on, and half the time, or most of the time, we don't know what's going on ourselves. You see how that would make you feel alone if people don't really understand you. Where am I to be pointed? Anyway, can you advance it?
Mm-hmm.
Another quote, this fella is a pastor who has with Alzheimer's. He says, it's so much easier just to stay in the safety of my home than expose myself to people who don't understand, people who raise their eyebrows when I have trouble making the right change at the cash register, or when I'm unable to think of the right words when I'm asked a question. You might ask, well, this is very insightful for someone who has dementia. The person I know would be able to tell me what's going on. Obviously, these are folks who are early enough in the process that they're mildly impaired. And the next one. I'm still the same person. I just can't do my work anymore. I'm still here. I need your friendship and acceptance. Having Alzheimer's, and actually this was my brother-in-law. Having Alzheimer's is like it was in the Vietnam War. 90% of the time you're bored out of your head, followed by minutes and hours of sheer terror. You're confronted with things like, how do I sit down in this chair? You know? So here you were, living your life, and all of a sudden, you're faced with something you don't know how to do. And you're overwhelmed again. And you're frightened. I dislike social workers, nurses, and friends who don't treat me as a real person. And then this one broke my heart when she said it to me. I used to be somebody. The sense of loss. And this one, I know you've heard this one. We've all heard this one. I'm so stupid. And that's stupid. You've got a brain disorder. So how are older adults different? Not even talking about people with dementia. Just normal aging. How are people different? Well, there's some normal aging memory changes. One is, we're going to pretend my hand is a brain cell. So I'm a social worker, I'm not a scientist. So I got a brain cell and I've got these dendrites coming off it and an axon and that connects to the next brain cell. Well, one brain cell connected to the next brain cell is just not as efficient as when you were young. That shouldn't surprise us. Our lungs aren't working as well after about age 45 or so. Your stomach, your kidneys, your liver, you're not as strong as you were when you were 20. Are we really astounded that one brain cell connected to the next brain cell is just not as efficient? And so what we'll often find is that people will have memories from a long time ago, back when those connections were efficient. You can remember supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. You can remember all kinds of stuff. But can I remember, and I don't have dementia at this point, as far as I know. Can I remember the name of the person I just met? Can I remember where I parked my car? I'm to the point now where when I park my car, maybe I'm at the Kroger, I'll say, I'm by the P from pharmacy, and there's a tree over the. You didn't have to do that when you were young. You immediately absorbed things, you immediately made connections, you understood where you were, and you walked out of Kroger straight to your car. I was so blessed when they came out with those cars that'll sort of beep. Do you remember when Kroger used to send people out with you with their groceries and help you load up your car? I would always say, no, because I didn't want them watching me going up and down the aisle of the beef car. Now I can just discreetly go, beep, 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 beep. And I got a 90% chance of finding them. And then there's also what we call a loss of reserve capacity. To have extra reserve, just like you have extra reserve in your stomach and your liver and your kidneys and your lungs when you're young. You've got lots of extra reserve in your brain, your cognitive abilities. I think of all our body systems as being on like a threshold. It takes this much heart power to get up the stairs. It takes this much cognitive power to get to my days. Well, young people are up here. They've got lots of reserve. As we get older, all humans and animals and really some plants have less and less and less reserve, less energy. Less energy in your cells are called the mitochondria, and therefore less energy in yourself. So we have less energy with normal aging. Much less if I have some kind of frailty. Or if I get like a urinary tract infection and I'm below the threshold. And it was there. I'm confused. And then the other thing about normal aging, and I don't know the science behind this, is you're more distractible. If someone were to come in late now, I would stop talking, because those of you who are over 45 and certainly over 60 would all be like watching. And then watching them put their things down. You're more distractible. I wonder if that's why they planned this room to be so compact. We don't have windows to watch people going by and things like that. So that's with normal aging. How does that all affect communication? To have less energy, to be more distractible. Well, dementia makes everything worse. You've got damage to your brain. Dementia is about damage. His brain is brain damage. So your executive functioning, executive run things. So if I want to put together a recipe that I've made for 50 years, and suddenly I can't remember, am I supposed to put 1 cup of flour in it or 2? And in what order? Damage to the hippocampus. The hippocampus is an interesting part of your brain. It's where your reasoning and judgment lie, and your immediate reaction to the world. Well, the Alzheimer dementia starts in the hippocampus. the other dementias all find their way to the hippocampus. And I realize I've now used the word dementia and I've used the word Alzheimer's. Like, what's the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia? Dementia is the general term. I'm having trouble with my thinking. I'm having trouble with my functioning. But why? This person's having dementia because they got Alzheimer's disease. This person has dementia because they've had some strokes. This person has dementia because they have Parkinson's disease. There's a whole bunch of reasons why you get dementia. And then if you're over 85, there's a really good chance you've got dementia because of two things happening. That you've had maybe little mini strokes plus Alzheimer's. So the hippocampus is where we do our reasoning and judgment. And I know you've had problems with this, being able to think clearly. If someone gets stressed, the hippocampus is full of like these stress hormones, they kind of can't think. And now you can't reason. And when I say you've had this trouble too, you got in an argument with somebody once, it was probably about politics. And they seem to have all the facts and figures, and all you had were your values. And then pretty soon you're like, well, and you can't keep up with their reasoning. And 3 hours later, when the stress hormones will settle down on your hippocampus, you're like, oh, there's like 4 things I could have said. If only the glucocorticoids hadn't been matching to the rest of the receptors in my hippocampus, I would have come up with the response. If Alzheimer's and the other dementias either start in the hippocampus or make their way there, we already have someone who has damaged reasoning. They can't reason. So that common advice you all got, probably the first piece of advice you got was, don't argue with them. Did you have that advice? Arguing is actually a type of reasoning. Like, can't you see such and such and such? And don't you? No, I can't. I got Alzheimer's, okay? I can't reason. So why argue? Why reason with someone who can't reason? Plus, it's hard. It's hard on you, it's hard on them, it's all stressful. So we don't argue with them. And then we also get stress and those stress hormones if we're being asked to do something more than we can handle. For a lot of people, it seems to be bathing. At memory lane, probably the call we get most often is, it's been 3 weeks when she's taken a bath. How can I better communicate that we're on the same page? And the bathing just seems to be like it's just like a big deal. I've got to take my clothes off. I've got to do this. There's all this executive function that's got to be in this order. And then there's all kinds of thoughts about maybe they're skin sensitive and they're feeling. The baby thing is still a bit of a mystery, but we try to get through it with good communication. And then if you feel stressed or humiliated, you have a sense of shame, a sense of loss of self. And so if I'm asking them to do something like, you know, it's time to take your bath now. Who are you to tell me that I should be taking a bath? And that comes straight out of humility. There's another part of your brain, so the hippocampus, where your things are. Another part of your brain, probably amygdala, where your basic emotions live, like safety, love, fear. And the greatest of all, the one that sends the most stress hormone to the hippocampus, is humiliation. And if a person feels humiliated, now they can't reason, and you start seeing behaviors. What do I mean by behaviors? They might like withdraw and get quiet. They might, get feisty and like, who are you? They might even strike out. They might start crying. when they can't reason because you feel humiliated. Did you do anything wrong? No. People do need to bathe at least every couple of weeks, or at least a bird bath or something. You did nothing wrong. But they perceived it as, oh, now she's telling me, now he's telling me I need to do. I used to be somebody. I used to be somebody who made those decisions for myself. So even though you did nothing wrong, you feel humiliated. So in our communication and trying to be one with them, we try to make them still feel like a person, like a somebody. We'll talk. This little cartoon is trying to show us back to the Alzheimer's dementia, even though there's a whole bunch of reasons you get dementia. The picture on the left is trying to show the cross section of a brain that has lots of healthy tissue. The picture on the left says this person lost so many brain cells that they even lost brain tissue. I could put my fingers right down into the sulci of it. But who wasn't going to have trouble thinking when you've lost so much of your brain, and especially that outer portion where a lot of the higher functioning is, and the hippocampus is down there. I get teased at work because I'm always talking about the hippocampus and hippocampal stress. So when we look at what are the barriers to communication, the first one is changes in the person themselves. But the next thing we want to be looking at is the environment that I'm trying to do my communicating with or in together. And people are easily distracted. They're distracted by noise. They're distracted by weird lighting. They're even distracted by their comfort. Like they made the mistake of sitting down on the couch, nowhere near any sort of armrest, and they're wondering how am I ever going to get back up again? And they're just distracted. They're even distracted by movements. You've probably seen speakers who walk back and forth as they talk. I'm not doing that because pretty soon you'd be looking at my walk and my gait, and what this is doing. And so if you do want to talk to someone who's older, and certainly someone with dementia, you want to try to stay still. Distracted by movements. And if you're one of those people who says, I can't help it. A lot of cultures claim that they can't help it because their hands move. I can't help it. I'm such and such ethnicity. No, it's your body. Get control of it. Because if I go like that, you're going to kind of look at my hands. We're trying to communicate with someone who's having trouble with being distracted. If the TV's on, it's not enough just to turn it down, because they'll still see movement and everything. Now, especially if you're in their house, you'll need to ask permission to turn off the TV, right? Because we want them to be whole and not hurt their ego. I'd probably blame myself, like, you know what? I get so distracted. Do you mind if I do this? Put it on you. Your shoulders are big enough to carry it. And then lighting. We want to have good enough lighting that they can see your face. There's a lot of people lip reading who don't even realize they're lip reading. And so it's good to be able to see your face. So problems, barriers can be in the person. Barriers can be in the environment. Barriers can be in ourselves. We might be a different age than the person. And so they're thinking like, what could you possibly know? I'm the one who raised you. And just our different experiences. This one could deal with like professionals in their life who lived a completely different life than they did. Like, how can I connect with that home health aide who has whole different life experiences? If I'm a different ethnicity from the person, if I'm not as rich as they are, or if I'm richer than they are, those could be barriers. Not so much for family. And then I can be causing distractions by doing things like talking too fast. I need to slow down. And you might say, I can't help it, I'm just someone who talks fast. You know, if I go to some fast food and say, I want a salad, you can tell that's what I mostly order, not salad. I want a salad and that sweet young things that'll be like, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I have no idea what you said. Here's $5 and hope it covers it. We can't listen as fast, but connections aren't good. Well, the person you're trying to communicate with also can't listen as fast. And I need to slow down. You need to slow down. And dementia makes it worse. So, to communicate what the elders need, they need slower pacing. They need less stress. You can't make it like such a big deal. Like, you know, we have to pick out a new Medicare Part D. And they're getting a little overwhelmed. You need to notice that overwhelm and figure out how can I get around this. They need comfortable physical surroundings so they aren't distracted by their body. They need meaningfulness. Now that's an interesting one. Children don't need that. Children can learn any darn thing you want them to learn. Please fly low. That stuff, that stuff, from my age. And if you think about it, a baby might be born in rural China or downtown Toledo or the hills of France and wine country. And wherever they're born, they need to make sense out of their environment because it's all meaningless until you make meaning. And so children can learn like anything, no matter where you plant them. I know when I was teaching at BGSU, I would have students who were like 18 to 22, but BGSU has this program where people over 65 can go for free. So there'd be people over 65 in the class too. Well, the young, and then there'd be people in their 40s. The young ones are like, pour it on in, just tell me anything. How do you want it back? You want me to write a test? Do you want me to write an essay? What? Just pour it on in. The 40 and above would all be saying things like, but how does that work? Because I was at the store and I recently saw a lady who did such and such, and that seems to conflict with what you're telling me. Because they're so full of knowledge already, they have to figure out how am I going to fit that in? What is the meaning? And they might reject what I have to say because it doesn't have meaning for them. Or they could make room for it and say, okay, that makes sense. Older people need it to be meaningful. So if you're trying to teach them how to do their peritoneal dialysis at home, it might be meaningful if you say, this will keep you out of the nursing home. This is meaningful. And then you need good health, actually, to be a great communicator. And so that's a barrier you may have not have anything to do with, right? So what don't we do? We don't try to argue. We don't try to convince. We're not trying to reason. Why am I reasoning with someone who can't reason? I was in the hospital on the orthopedic floor. I had a thing with my foot. And I was there for a couple of days. And across the hall were two women who all day, all night were throwing the F-bomb. And working where I do it didn't bother me. I was just more curious about like, what's going on? That behavior was happening. And I saw what was happening. This one was like super angry all the time. And this one was really frightened all the time. And the nurse would come in and she would do things like, it's time for such and such. And this one would be going, oh, well, the doctor wants you to give it a reason. Well, who's that? Well, this is going to make you feel so much better. And she died. The other one, it's time for such and such. Well, the doctor wants you to do this. It's going to make you feel so good. Well, one day, the angry one got out. And she was one of those people who walks at 90 degrees, you know. In fact, she was there because she had fallen and hurt her head. And so of course I got out of bed to look to see what's happening. I'm just trying to learn. I'm not nosy. And I saw all these like 9 people around her saying things like, you need to get back to your room, you're a fall risk. Do I have to call your son and call him up here? Did that calm her down? I saw my nurse was hanging back and he had one of those computers on a stick, you know? And when he came in, I said, I have to compliment you for not joining that gang. He says, well, I would have, I didn't know what to say. So I told him the very same thing I'm telling you. And in my remaining days in the hospital, he never had another problem again. Don't reason with someone who can't reason. Nevertheless, it's not like they fell off the cliff of reasoning. So I will give them like one reason and see if they get it. But if they don't get it, stop. The handout that I gave you, and we can look at it later, was if you're being reasonable, rational, and logical, we'll just get in trouble. Why am I reasoning with someone who can't reason? And so the angry one, time for such and such, well, give her one reason. Well, the doctor wants you. Stop with the reasons. And just, I know, ever since you've been here, people have been bossing you around. We get to the truth of what's actually happening, right? I feel like I'm not somebody anymore. People are bossing me around. I want to be independent. I know. Ever since you've been here, people that I'll tell you something, Phil. You and me, as long as I'm with you, no one's bossing you. And we'll just get that the frightening one. Time for such and such. You know, well, the doctor wants people one reason. The doctor wants you to such. I know. This is really scary, isn't it? I just want you to know I'm here with you. I'm by your side. We're going to get through this. So how do you translate that to home and the bathing? Time for such and such. Let's say that one of those people are independent. Let's go back to the hippocampus. Hippocampus, where you do your reasoning. You very reasonably said, you know, today's shower day. And this is a good time. I've got the whole bathroom all set up for you. They need to think it through. Do I need the shower? But their hippocampus is damaged, so they can't do the reasoning. They need you to do the reasoning, but they don't want you doing the reasoning. They want to do the reasoning, but they can't reason. So they need to reason, but they can't reason, and you're left with no. A lot of the no's come from people feeling humiliated and not being able to do their own reasoning. And now you've got a no in between you. Good luck getting past that. I know you've learned different strategies like, well, I just leave the bathroom and I come back a couple hours later and maybe we'll have a fresh start. So you do have various strategies. It's not like no is the end of the world. But if someone feels humiliated and you've got that stress hormone of humiliation, I should be able to figure this out, but I can't figure this out. I need her to figure it out, but I don't want her to figure it out. It's all brain. It's not them being resistant, mean. This brain is brain damage, unless they were always like that. But oftentimes, no, this is a new behavior. We don't want to be bossy. Same issue. We don't want to use a sharp tone of voice. Same issue. Because now we're getting them excited. We want this hippocampus calm. As calm as they can be. We don't want to be constantly correcting them. Same issue. We don't want to use condescending tones. Same issue. And we don't want to rush them. We've already talked about how you can't think as fast when you're older, and certainly when you have dementia. So the things I'm going to ask you to do seem to break communication. You've spent decades of your life trying to be more transparent and more honest and more open. And I'm going to ask you, don't. Which increases your stress. And now you're going to have to figure out what you're going to do with your stress. If you can't be reasoning and you can't be logical, you're going to have to, some people exercise, some people house clean, some people pray, some people meditate, some people talk with people who understand. And you're going to do something with your stress, because everything I'm going to ask you to do is not normal. Not for those who try to be. You want to try to create that environment that's free of distractions. We want to smile. That might be like the last thing in the whole world you want to do right now, and you have to do it anyway. We need them calm. Calm, calm, calm. We need to get in and approach them from the front. So rather than, let's say they're on the couch, you're coming in from the kitchen, and you start talking to somebody who you already know has trouble processing. I think sometimes what they're hearing when you're coming up behind them is like Charlie Brown's teacher. No, take the extra 1.5 seconds and get all the way in front of them. You get in front of them. Get their attention. Sometimes you have to do it multiple times. You can even see it. I'm gonna give you a social work trick. It's to make you lose respect for me, because you'll think I'm a manipulative person, but you know, I may never see you again in my life. You're talking to someone, just an older person or a person with dementia, and you see their eyes drift. They got distracted. One thing social workers will do, or I'll do, is remember how I said movement can distract them? I might move, I might do something like, and they follow my hand right up to my lips. And now I've got their attention again. Or I might do something like, move my body like this. And we get them back. Now, the cat's out of the bag if you do something like this. You're making a spectacle of yourself and you've broken communication. But you could use movement to your advantage. You could do these things on purpose. And you're thinking, why do you do it on purpose? But you're dealing with someone who's having trouble communicating. We need to try to stay in communion. And then obviously, if you know them well enough to know they hear better out of one ear than the other. So that here. And then I'll repeat myself again. I'll say, slow down. How slow could you go? I've been talking to you at about this pace. If you were 20, I'd probably be talking about this pace, because these 20-year-olds kind of don't want to hear me talking about this pace. But if I'm talking to someone with dementia or an older person, I might talk at about this pace. With some pauses in there to let those brain cells connect. And I'm doing it because they need me. Now, if you want me to continue at this pace, I can if you want me to. I can do it for hours if I can. Or not. Literally slow down. And we're back to the, I can't help it, I'm someone who talks fast. Well, stop it. It's your body, get control of it. Now that you're aware about that whole brain connection thing, slow down. And then make your movements slow too. So you're not starting. And then another way to slow everything down is to repeat yourself several times. Now, admittedly, we're trying to protect our ego, so you don't want to repeat yourself so much that you're insulting. Could you find a way to repeat yourself and bring the same thing up? Relax and let them feel safe. I really, really, really think a lot of people with dementia are frightened. The world has become something they don't understand. They're not understanding themselves, just like that one guy said. They don't even understand how to use the chair. I think lots of times, am I doing the right thing? Am I where I'm supposed to be? I want to go home. And they've lived there for 46 years. I think lots of times they don't feel safe. And they're frightened. So we want, like, no matter what you do, you're safe with me. You're safe. It's okay. I even will use the word safe. Use a gentle tone of voice. Be unfailingly kind. So you can see why I said, I'm asking you to do unnatural things. Unnatural things. you've spent decades with this person, building up how you communicate together. And now this dementia has come along and torn communication. And so you have to deliberately do things that are unnatural. And that does cause stress in you. And you'll have to figure out what you're gonna do with that stress. But that's another topic. Back to that ego, always addressing them as an adult. So even if I speak slowly, I'm not gonna, sing songs like, well, I'm trying to say that Part D Medicare, it's just a different animal. Okay, now you've created hippocampal stress. They're feeling insulted that you're talking all sing-songy and cute. Just slow down. Don't have to be cute. We want to be conversational, not inquisitional. So instead of asking them a whole bunch of questions, we'll just talk about the weather or something. Be patient, give them lots of time, try to reduce the tension, anxiety. Be aware that they could be fearful. Be positive and reassuring. Interestingly, there's a male-female difference there. Women, you can praise those cows come home. You almost can't praise, it's too much. Men, if you lay the praise on, okay, I'm generalizing, I'm sorry. But men tend to, if you lay the praise on too heavy, they're a little bit like, oh, like back off. But so do be reassuring, do be positive. You're doing great. You're wonderful. And then say thank you. So many times people go through their whole lives as an older person, no one has ever thanking them for things. If they give you wisdom, if they give you advice, if they were a veteran or some other public servant, thanking them like, Mom, you were the one who gave me my work ethic. And I'm so grateful to how you stepped in and took care of the kids when I needed to go to work. Remind them who they are. Remind them that they're a person, that they're somebody. You got me through raising my kids, or whatever it is. It needs to be something real, something sincere. And then respect their reality. So they're saying, I know they broke into my house last night and stole my purse. Because I know where I put my purse. So thieves absolutely came in. So just like those people in the hospital would say, that must be really, well, first we reasoned with them once. I don't think anyone broke in because the door was locked when I got here. Oh, it was? Problem solved. Let's go look for your purse. But what if that doesn't work? That must be really scary to think of people in your house. And then whatever it is you're gonna do. Let me look around and see if there's any evidence. Be positive and hopeful that anybody can change, anybody can grow, even sick people can grow and change, and it really all comes down to respect. Thoughts, questions, discussion?
I think it's helpful, and I don't know people. I've seen one cousin's wife who had Alzheimer's, and she was aware of it when she was starting to lose it because her mother had had it. She recognized it, but I wasn't around. But then other people with dementia, and my understanding is that Alzheimer's, if it's diagnosed for real, it's autopsy or invasive, whatever. Don't do ordinary. But I've been around people with symptoms. I was thinking of my mom's sister when she was in a nursing home, and she would say when I visited her, she said, "Well, I don't want to hear at home, any of them." Well, then she talked somebody into letting her out. She was a walk, right? Out the front door. She says, "I'm meeting somebody." And so a visitor opened the door because she seemed to make sense. Well, she went to the outside and then she's lost.
Okay, you brought up like 4 different things. And I need to address them all, if I can follow. That she met people with Alzheimer's, a cousin had it, and then other people who have dementia. You don't know if it's Alzheimer's or not until autopsy. That's a separate discussion. Generally, doctors who've been around the block and they've seen a lot, they can be pretty clear about, is this back or is it Alzheimer's? with pretty, but you're right, an autopsy would tell you for sure, maybe. And you also talked about, a woman who got out because she seemed like a reasonable person. It's not like you've got like a broken arm that anyone can recognize there's something wrong with this person. You could look very reasonable and say reasonable things. So, yeah, it's an interesting issue, but I think I've already missed something.
I did want to just finish it with the Good Samaritan Home was juvenile, put her in the new Alzheimer's unit, they call them memory care now. So there was one extra set of codes to get out and whatever. And her daughter, I was emailing back and forth that she had family close to, but Sharon was saying, I'm gonna call the doctor and have her take her out of that lockup. And, well, I'd eaten lunch with her with mom the Saturday before.
I said, let's talk about memory care units. If, the statistics are, I'm sorry if you don't want to hear this, but the statistics are 86% of people who have dementia will end up their life in a facility. Even though you made all kinds of promises, I promised Dad that she would never. Statistics are against you unless you've got 6 unemployed kids to help you out. And so should they be in a regular part of the nursing home or a specialized area called the memory care unit? And I hate it when even the marketers call it the lockup unit, as if the emphasis were on the door. On the door instead of what's happening behind the door. So we'll call it memory care units, it's called care, people. It depends if the person is, and I gotta say something very sad. Near the end of their life, and they're kind of just like living in a lazy boy, their eyes half open. What benefit are they getting out of a memory care unit? They'd probably be better in the skilled care part. Someone who could take care of their body. But if they want lots of activity and stuff, they're geared towards memory care. Some nursing homes have figured out how to do dementia care for everybody. And to tell the truth, if you've got great communication and great activities, we all benefit. Any of us could use that. And so they might just have like a wander guard on someone's ankle, that if you get close to the door's gonna lock. So memory care unit or not memory care unit, it varies from person to person. And I was supposed to, talk 45 minutes, it's now been 46.
You're good.
The point though that I wanted to make was that I told Sharon, I said, I think that would be a mistake. Because Aunt Ruth said, I don't know why I'm here. I have 2 other homes.
That's what it reminded me.
Right.
So communication of people who are saying, like, they're in a facility or they're in your house and they keep saying, I want to go home. I find I want to go home almost like poetry. Like people with dementia speak poetry. You know, when you read a poem or a religious tract or something, and a Bible and you read it and you say, oh, okay, I get it. And then someone else reads it and it gets a little bit deeper. And then you go to a class about it and it gets even deeper. I want to go home is that kind of poem. On one hand, it's, I don't belong here. I want to go to 123 Main Street where I'm from. But a deeper thought is, I want, well, some people are talking about, I want to go home. Like other. But sometimes they're saying, I want my life back. I'm not living my life. I want to go home. Now, even if you were to take them to 123 Main Street and they couldn't survive there, they're yearning and aching to go back home. I want to go back to a place where I understood everything that was around me, how to use it, where I fit, how I want to go home. So reasoning doesn't seem like the thing to do, like, you are home. You are home. No, I'm not home because I'm not comfortable. I don't have my life back. And so then we communicate by saying, like, I know this is really hard, isn't it? I wish this wasn't happening to us. I'm even with us. We're in communion, we're in communication. I wish this wasn't happening to us. It's really hard on you, hard on me. I just want you to know I'm with you. I'm with you.
And after we ate, she didn't want to visit. She said, I guess I'll go home now. And she went,
Because you get more comfortable.
and her room in the memory care unit was home now.
So thank you, those are all great comments, and lunch is here. So we need to do that. What do they have for lunch? Lunch part. Sandwiches. And some. I never did figure out where it's supposed to come.
No, you're good. It's over here because it's connected to the flash drive. Yeah. Yeah. So you're fine though. Really. Very important.
Yeah, we
Thank
stay-
you.
No, I'm just using this part. I thought my. Oh, yeah. Wow, great.
Meeting.
Stone, and I'm with the Alzheimer's Association Northwest Ohio chapter. We cover 24 counties in Northwest Ohio. But we only have one office, and that's in Maumee. We have social workers work for us. We have those who help us set up education programs to bring awareness and education to the communities. We have caregiver support groups. We have volunteers who facilitate our caregiver support groups and also help us with our awareness presentations and education programs. We also have a 24-hour helpline that people can call any time of the day, weekends, holidays, 2 a.m. if you need it, to vent, to ask questions, to get resources, to just get overall support and answers to your questions. So really, our programs and services really focus around support and awareness and education. I've been with the association for about 6.5 years now. And I'm out of the Maumee office. I cover 5 of the 24 counties. Did you want to talk a little bit about memory lane?
So I'm from Memory Lane Care Services. Some of you know us because we have an adult day center downstairs. Right near that front desk, there's a big wreath on the door, you're behind that door. And you're welcome to knock on it and take like a little mini tour. I mean, it's like one room. What's an adult day center? I think of adult day as being good for people who wouldn't do well at a senior center. You know, at a senior center, you're toileting yourself. You're saying, I'm gonna go to this lecture, I'm gonna do that. So some people don't do well in the senior center because of mobility issues. A lot of people don't do well at the senior center because of cognitive issues. And so adult day is, because you still need to go out and have fun. You still need to be around people, you still need to have a meaningful life. Just because you can't do the senior center doesn't mean you still can't have fun. And so the Wood County Committee on Aging provides major support. They built the whole construction, we didn't have to pay for construction. They give us free rent. We get the meals. I do try to get down here on days when it's ham rolls. And they do the maintenance. So they give tremendous support, all in the belief that people who can't do senior centers still need to have a nice life. So that's how it helps them. The way it helps the caregiver is you get some respite. About 50% of our caregivers are working, so this gives them a chance to get out and go to work. And the other 50% are people like the same age or something, like spouses and sisters and brothers. And they need some time off. We have a center in Toledo too, so if you're in northern Wood County, now that center's been going since the nineties. And it's bigger, about 40 people. This one, we want 22 people a day, and it's not happening, we've been open over a year. So if you get the word out that there's an adult day center and it's super affordable, because you know how at the senior center, you use voluntary contributions for your meals, there's a suggested contribution, and then you can either do it or not. We have a voluntary contribution based on income. So, I'm pretty crazy about adult day centers. And then we do have, social workers, there's a nurse there every day, activities, and things like that. And then, in addition to the adult day center, we have what we call wraparound services. We provide counseling about caregiving issues. We work with the area office on aging to place people in facilities, assisted living or nursing home for a short respite stay, that you don't get the bill, it comes to us using area office money. And then recently we started a brand new program called Hospital Transitions. This one's dementia related. The day center, you don't necessarily have to have dementia. If a person with dementia or their caregiver is hospitalized, you'll get a visit in the hospital, a visit at home, and then 90 days of follow-up, just to make sure that caregiving is going okay, that you understand the meds, things like that. That's on the grant. So memory lane care services, we try to be as helpful as possible.
And I think from here, we're just opening it up to questions. So are there any questions for either one of us about resources or the needs?
I reached the point where I could no longer care for my husband at home. On 911, I was calling him down, under certain circumstances. So he's currently at a nursing home, and I'm feeling, thank God, he's getting the care he needs to get. So my point is, still, sometimes when he talks, I cannot understand what he's saying. And I made a mistake a long time ago saying, I don't understand you, that's not the thing to say. The question, what should I say? When I don't understand what he's saying.
And what have you been saying?
Right?
What have you tried out besides the,
I can just smile and act like I'm smile and act like I'm hearing what he's saying.
that's what I do too.
Okay.
So that's what we do.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah.
Because it's really about communication. It doesn't matter what words we're saying, I'm with you. I'm with you.
What I also did not say is that he has 20 years of hearing and about 25% of a week here, hearing them, but writing, he still understands what I'm writing. I do not understand what he's writing now. So, I feel finally I can celebrate the life I am having, because I need to do that.
You can celebrate the life I'm having.
Yes, because I am trying to.
Oftentimes we'll hear spouses say, I get to stop being the nurse and return to being his wife,
Right.
daughters, and sons and husbands.
And I also carry around the photograph taken 20 years ago, where we were very happy. And it helps me to remember that. And I show people sometimes that because it's a very special. So that helps you.
But that's a great example of, we have to do things on purpose. And so you on purpose are carrying this photograph to care for yourself. A lot of times the way we cope with stress is we just sort of like, I just power through it, I just do it, I just need to do it. But if we stop and think, what do I need? How can I do this? And one thing you've chosen is, I have this photograph, it has meaning to me. I remember you're taking care of yourself on purpose.
And I show people many times. On purpose. I'll explain. We were very fortunate. We were out there. My husband retired. He had 16 years. He was the manager of a band And we went all over the Midwest with the band, and when I went to events, I never would have gone to because of the band.
Speaking of taking care of yourself, one thing we do is we do education programs. And I don't have enough to do that.
Okay.
We have a 4-week session coming up that you could either join by video conference or in person in Toledo. We call it's the evidence-based program called Places. And the CE part of it is caregiver empowerment. So many times caregivers feel like, now this has happened, now that's happened, and now I gotta deal with this. And you forget that of how to take care of yourself and what you can do and where you do have power. And this ACEs is 4 weeks. But apparently y'all are willing to do sessions, but I see notebooks in front of you and you're doing sessions. About techniques, some of them that to remind you of, and others that might be new to you, of how you can bring power back into your life. So think about that. And I would need to know ahead of time, so if you're gonna do teleconference, because you don't want to come up to Toledo, I need to get that workbook to you. We do education programs, and every Wednesday at 2, there's, I guess it feels like a support group, but going an education group. And people come in person or by video conference or by telephone every Wednesday at 2. And you can get tips and strategies from each other. And don't be freaked out that there's titles for each of those weeks. Adults being what they are, they talk about whatever they darn well want to talk about. And then I need to bring it around to that topic. So we do try to support the caregivers too, like the Alzheimer's Association does. And you have functionary.
We have care consultations where we meet with families and really meet them where they're at. It's anywhere from, I'm having concerns about my memory, where does my first step, where do I need to go? To a family who's placing their loved one in a long-term care facility, they're, having challenges with having to make that decision and just, a little bit of support. And how do I tell my loved one that this is maybe the next step? So, we talk about those conversations and how that individually conversations. And we do have our caregiver support group that carries for those who are caring for someone with Alzheimer's or any type of dementia.
This ACEs, is that is premium,
Chris for me? No, so Chris and Lynn and I talked about Lynn Ritter and Chris Karina. We wanted a session that wouldn't overlap theirs. So there's partner and caring, I think it's called. Because we've all worked together for like 35, 40 years, so pretty much. And so ours doesn't overlap theirs. Ours is about caregiver stress and how to deal with it and how to get a sense of power back. There's the partner in care. You learn about what is dementia and how do you care for someone with dementia. So I guess that gives you a sense of empowerment. The knowledge does, but no, they don't overlap.
how often are you finding grandparents raising grandchildren or being diagnosed? That's what I'm dealing with.
The grandparent who's raising a grandchild is now diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And there was one family where the 5-year-old was the caregiver because grandma was supposedly taking care of him. But he was the one who would go out and get the cereal, and he knew how to pour milk and take care of the 2 of them until social workers became aware of that. And how often? Hardly ever.
Really?
But the fact that I
figured that becoming a common problem.
are you running across?
Haven't really, I know I've come across where the individual is still babysitting, but not raising. Which I know that the numbers are very high in a lot of communities, but I really haven't had those families reach out.
That's when you need a social worker involved or a nurse to start figuring out, so what are we gonna do about it? It's not necessarily obvious if grandma's dementia is very mild, she's still driving and safely driving.
There are,
They, okay,
but now it's it's logistics of, her visitation time with them. I feel like I have to be present to make sure that, because the reasoning, the overwhelming stuff.
and who's, what she's gonna say.
So I'm trying to, so. Yeah, that's just,
I could see why I'd wanna do it too, if I could just imagine grandma saying things like, I don't know why they won't let you stay with me anymore.
oh, no, we're not there yet.
Oh,
There-
okay.
no, that part is, but it is okay. It's just that, okay, you've got a 7 and a 9-year-old who are very active and you've got to keep them busy. Your brain is starting.
They're being taken care of.
Yeah, so I do the driving, I try to make sure. And I just came off 9 years of taking care of our pets. And then I realized, I think we're dealing with this.
Jennifer, are you seeing this, grandparents who they themselves have dementia taking care of kids?
Been a while, but yes, I was actually from my member, was asked to be on the school board, school advisory committee. Because the school was having concerns about some of the grandparents who were taking care of grandchildren after school and picking them up. In some cases, it was more generational issues rather than dementia. So for example, one of the students, he always talked about war. And only watched the History and the Weather Channel.
Yeah.
So things like that is kind of like, oh, well, but there are times too that something, it's like, well, grandma didn't make me, or grandma said I didn't have to, or sometimes there's odd things, but you know what? Sometimes it's just grandparents being grandparents, like, well, if it was my kid, I was raising my kid, I could, do different things, but as a grandparent, we tend to spoil more, so. So I guess I mind,
I guess your question is sensitizing me to this, and I guess my ears will be pricked up and listening more.
I wonder too if it might be something, because I know I cover Ottawa County, they have a program, Grand Love, which is a program specifically for grandparents who are raising their grandchildren, and they make sure that they have meals, and they make sure they have the resources that they need. I think there's one here in Wood County, I don't know what it's,
I don't remember what it's called, but,
but maybe we can.
and then in general, the area office on aging.
I mean, at this point, I'm filling the gap and all that stuff, but I'm just curious how much to accommodate.
Yeah.
It seems to me like as many grandparents are raising their kids, grandkids, it's gotta be.
Well, if you do want to, I think my phone is over there, if you want to call the kinship navigator program at area office on aging, they could maybe give you some support in dealing with these kids, but they're in foster care.
Oh, yes, they're being cared for now and making decisions for it will be permanently, so.
I know there are a lot of books, if that is something that people are looking to read to children, to explain to them at various ages why grandma, grandpa is are saying these things or acting this way. That might be. That might depend on, I don't know how often they're.
Well, grandma is fine for them because grandma let them do whatever they want, so that's where they're at. That's what everybody got with grandma.
I think I'm going toward what Dakota said, like finding some reading material or videos or however kids are given it nowadays. So why does grandma act that way? If someone is interested in the kinship navigator program, grandparents raising grandkids in general, a lot of grandparents are like 40, so we're not necessarily talking. It's at the area office 419-725-6963. Now that is a big issue, the whole grandparents raising kids. Is North Dakota, was saying, Ottawa County, and Wood County, and Liston.
I am sure that there are probably more cases than what we're aware of.
Right, like I said, I haven't been taking care of somebody for 9 years and watch their decline and, you know, all of a sudden like, wait a minute, there's something
I recognize this.
I read.
Yeah, that 5-year-old who was the caregiver was an interesting one. Okay, so other resources. A major resource is the Wood County Committee on Aging. You could call here. I think they would connect you probably to the Social Services Department first. And you might have issues, things like, how do I get home delivered meals? How do I get someone in the house to, home health aid? That was a tough one. Because, a lot of times we have to pay for that out of pocket. But the Wood County Committee on Aging would know if you don't. They would know there's various programs called Passport and Mind Care. You might call them about, I have safety concerns. He's leaving the house at nighttime. How do I get some alerts on the doors or things like that? You're also welcome to call. I assume I can volunteer the Alzheimer's Association for those kind of calls.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely give some suggestions on things to do, like maybe an extra lock up top or on the bottom of the door, or, there's various things that could be, Project Lifesaver, calling Project Lifesaver. They can, it depends on the county on who it's through, and I'm not sure about.
You still have the
bracelet or an anklet, but it's basically radioactive, where sometimes the sheriff's department, if they're in control of the program, then the caregiver would call sheriff's department, my loved one is missing, and then they're able to find them. Usually I think the time is within 30 minutes.
And just to ease concerned about radioactive, it's GPS.
No, yeah, not radioactive.
Yeah. Did your antenna go? Yeah. The fine people. So we have it.
Yeah.
So the Wood County Committee on Aging is a great place to call. And then the area office on aging covers 10 counties, including Wood. I actually don't call their main number. As a caregiver, I would go straight to the caregiver support department. And that's 419-725-6983. For all these similar questions, what I just said, plus the facility rep. So 419-725-6983 is the caregiver support department at the Area Office on Aging. And if they can't handle exactly what it is you're calling about, they're likely to know who can. And then we at Memory Lane Care Services take calls all day long. I think I made reference to, it's been 3 weeks, you should take her back. And we'll stay on the phone with you for an hour and a half, and there's no charge for that. It's just something we do as a community service. How do you get mom to start driving? And then we have those education programs on those kind of topics too. I think it was 2 months ago, what do you do with a resistant relative? Of course, it comes down to communication again. There aren't always answers for everything. What you're dealing with is stressful and depressing. But I think at least we don't have to be alone. We don't have to be alone. With people going through it with you.
Another thing the aging agency does is they have wheelchairs and different things, right? That
Right here.
they'll loan out. Which I think is good to know, because if you're like, I want to go to the day, I want to go somewhere for the day, but he needs a wheelchair. Where do I get one? They'll loan you one.
Yeah, the senior center has them. And then if you need a long term, I think they'll even probably do some longer term loans. They did when I worked in. And then the Ability Center on Monroe Street has a whole warehouse full of things. They even have briefs and the Area Office on Aging caregiver support could hook you up with briefs. And I noticed they send out Tranquility. That's the Cadillac of all adult briefs. I saw a demonstration once where they took a Tripoli brief and took a whole 32 ounce bottle of whatever. And it absorbed it and it was dry on it. And tranquility. Wow.
Now, is that just for Lucas County?
They got 10 counties. The area of Sunny Dean River support has 10 counties.
The Ability Center?
Oh, so the Ability Center is Northwest Ohio. So you got the Ability Center on Monroe Street in Sylvania. And then you go down to the first block and turn right, and there's a whole warehouse full of stuff. On Skelly. Sometimes people drop off donations to us. And it's things, I can always use pull-up briefs, I can find people who need that. But they'll drop off wound dressings and all kinds of stuff, and so I'm over at the Ability Center a lot, giving them equipment and other stuff.
So if you know what they have, I might be looking for, I think it's called a Hoyer or something where
Yeah,
you pull it up and then they can stand up and then you flip those seats.
okay, that's different, that's a Sarah Steady.
Yes. is there-
Those are like magic. I did drop off, well. I didn't drop them off, they were heavy. That was not a Sarah Steady, but there's another one that. They're sitting. And then we'll go back to Hoyer Lift. They're sitting, and then they hold on to something. And it lifts them and stands. So that's called a stand lift. The Sarah Steady is a beautiful creature that if you could get them to stand, it flips a seat underneath them and now you can roll, use that in the day center. A Hoyer lift is Sarah Steady.
There's,
And if you want to see what one looks like, drop in our day center. And maybe we've got an example if we use it. And a Hoyer lift is different. I have known people who do this by themselves. Now you have a person who really can't move. Even two people can't help themselves. And they're in bed. The Hoyer lift will go under them, hook up, lift them, and then you can push them around to be their recliner and get them down. That's someone who couldn't help it all. I actually knew a lady who was in her 80s did that with her husband, but that's kind of a big deal. By the time someone needs a Hoyer lift, probably ought to be thinking about nursing home.
does the mobility center have hospital beds too?
I don't know.
They might get donations like randomly too, that
Mhm.
it just depends on when you call.
Mhm. I remember when I worked here, there was one hospital bed in the loan out equipment and, but we obviously did it for long-term loans. So it would come back up only after a few years.
Hmm.
I don't know, do you have any beds in the basement now?
Probably not. Yeah, I think so.
Any questions about resources or what may be available?
Then maybe you want to talk about dementia. That's something, both Dakota and I know a lot about. What's on the news? On the news lately are things like, football players who get dementia, right? And that one is called CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. It was discovered in 1929, but back then they called it dementia pugilistica. Pugilists, boxers would take a lot of blows to the head and would get dementia. And then I don't know when, 80s or 90s, they discovered a lot of football players had dementia pugilistica. And they renamed it chronic traumatic, for taking blows, encephalopathy. And things like helmets aren't gonna help. Because if you think about it, a helmet protects your skull from breaking, right? Like if I were holding a raw egg and my hand was the helmet, the egg is my head. And I were to go la 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 la, bang 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 bang, I'd open my hand and the shell's perfect, right? So the helmet protects the shell, the skull, but what does the egg look like inside? It's all the clock. And so that's what CTE is. You take all these little hits. You don't have to have a concussion. You're just getting hit. So since then, they've seen like cheerleaders have it because they'll be way up high and then someone has to drop and catch them. Well, inside your head is going blah. And inside the skull, you've got sharp bits that's breaking the cloth. I think that's the scientific word, isn't it, cloth? And so you'll see cheerleaders, you see soccer players, you'll see football. So, yeah, any contact sport. So what they have been working with helmets, with football, mostly people I understand don't really want to wear them, but they can actually keep the brain from slopping around inside there. I think it involves some neck support and things like that. So they might come up with ways to prevent CTE. So CTE is on the news. And I guess we also see the alternate drugs on the news. Do you want to talk about that?
So, right now, the newest medications that are currently available are Leqembi and Consumma. So both of those medications have to be given to an individual in the very early stages of Alzheimer's or mild cognitive impairment. They have to have the diagnosis. They can't, doctor with some sort of dementia, they have to have either Alzheimer's or mild cognitive impairment, again, very early. But it slows down the progression of the disease ultimately. I know a couple of years ago, somebody who works at the local chapter she went to a conference and sat beside somebody, she didn't know it at the time, but sat beside somebody who had been on that for a couple of years. This individual was a clinical trial. But she had been on it for a couple of years, and she said she had a full, like maybe 15-minute conversation with this individual, never even knew that this individual had Alzheimer's. So there was something, and the lady's husband had said, I bet you didn't realize that she was looking at this disease, and she was like, actually, I really didn't. So, these medications, we're not always pushing them, but we just want to make sure that people know that they are available. So people have options, because they're just like any medication, these medications may not be available for everybody, depending on other medications you may be on, or other medical issues that you may have, that sort of thing. But and then back in May, a new blood test became available to basically help with the diagnostic process. So it's a blood test to test the biomarkers of Alzheimer's. So you do have to be at least 55 years or older, and you do have to have symptoms of the disease. So have to say anybody will know it.
So that addresses the issue you brought up during my talk, about you can't really diagnose until after someone dies. Wouldn't it be wonderful that we get to the point where we can just do a blood draw and actually find it? We already knew you could do spinal taps and such for certain, but for certain dimensions. So are we there that we could just diagnose like that? Not necessarily, but the kind of thing that we at Mary Lane and Alzheimer's Association do is, even if we can't do the diagnoses and we don't do the assessments ourselves, we can help you figure out how to live with it. And so like today's talk was, how do I communicate with someone who has dementia? Other talks are, how do I deal with someone who's resistant? How do I help them stop driving? How do I?
Many of the suggestions work better with anybody that's losing, and because we like to stay in control. And so the suggestions on how to treat people is right.
Is to recognize the loss. Or at least the illusion of everything. But I hear your point. We all are dealing with loss, and it makes you feel out of control. And how, so a lot of the suggestions we were talking about earlier, on how to help someone.
But it's easier, people with all ages, I mean, we live in the Washington DC area and they have, my first baby was born and the family was all. Was with naval observatory and I mean, it's like new baby and telephone calls, expensive, email, this stuff, mail tech a couple of days, so doctor's spot, baby and child care, well, you look, wouldn't any question. But he said, children might be life decisions, they aren't told everything, but some things said, are not negotiable. For instance, bedtime, I mean, it's bedtime, I mean, let's not fight over that, but he said, don't say, do you want to go to bed? Say, do you want to go to bed now or in 10 minutes?
So you bring up an interesting caregiving issue. A lot of people talk about something called role reversal. And they say, so now I'm my mother's mother. And I would like to encourage you to not really think in those terms of role reversal. Because let's say you have a child who cannot make decisions. And so you need to handle their money. You need to decide, yeah, you are going to go to school every day. Yes, this is where you're going to live. A very young child, you might even need to be feeding them. A very young child, you're even changing their clothing. So now I have an elder and they also can't make good decisions and I need to handle their money. I need to decide where they're going to live. I might need to be changing their briefs. I might even need to be feeding them. Have I become their parent? Not really, because with children, you have a responsibility to help a person grow. And these are already people who are grown. These are already people who have their own moral identity. These are people who are adults. And so we aren't actually reversing roles, even though we're doing the very same thing for both of them. We're handling the money for both of them. We're changing the diaper for both of them. Except we don't use the word diaper when it's an older adult. We can use the word brief, dignity, respect. And just like our day center, we don't call it the daycare, we call it the day center, day services, respect. You don't actually reverse roles. You're just changing roles. And you don't have the moral responsibility of making that person, that elder, grow up to be a good person. The response, okay, how much control do you have over your children, making them a good person? But you still have a responsibility to try, right? You don't have a responsibility towards your elder to make them into a good person. So the whole idea of these are children and role reversals, I don't think it's helpful to you, because now you've given up your parent. A guy who just left the room shared a story of his mom has dementia and he really can't have conversations with her anymore, but he knows she still wants to be a mother. And so he'll tell Mom, I had such a rough day at work. She'll say, oh, come here, son boy, and hug him. If you give away your mother and she's no longer your mother, you've lost your mother. He still gets to have comfort from his mother. And I did see a mom and daughter. Her dementia was very deep. She really couldn't even speak anymore. And daughter was sitting by her knees on the floor. And the daughter got a little bit overwhelmed. And she laid her head on her mom's lap to cry a little bit. And Mom realized, it's okay, honey, it's okay. She came up with some words to say it's okay. So role reversal, you're giving away your parent. You don't want to give away your parent. And then when it comes to respect and dignity, people want to be independent. It's a Western hemisphere sort of thing that we're proud to be independent. And it can cause shame and humiliation to say, oh, now I guess she's my mother. You know, so we don't want people to feel shamed and humiliated. So thank you for bringing up that topic about children. Yeah.
Oh, good. I have a couple things. One is, so when they fall, somebody falls and they don't hit their head, that jarring, that's still jiggling your brain, right?
it would take repeated falls, I would think, for that jiggling on the CTE.
So just bang, bang, bang instead of one big bang.
So one big bang would be called traumatic brain injury, TBI. And so one big bang, and TBI, sometimes it's like a bruise on the brain. The CTE, let me back up. With those repeated blows that football players get back to my brain cell axon, dendrites, started that, is actually stretching the axon over and over and over again. That fall that you're talking about, the traumatic brain injury, is more like bruising the brain. Sometimes you recover from it, sometimes you don't, but it's a different thing. It's not a stretching of the axon, it's more like hurting.
So then another subject is when they go under to have surgery,
Yeah,
do they not come back if they have dementia? Do they not come back to where they were? Do they regress even more?
I've seen both, that one, yeah, that's how this goes.
Yeah, so sometimes people are perfectly fine before going into surgery, and then they come out of the anesthetic. The anesthetic can cause some permanent damage as well. And sometimes then if the person does already have dementia, sometimes I think in the cases that I've seen, the doctors may be a little leery about, depending on what the surgery is. Because I have had some people say, well, my doctor has decided not to give me a knee replacement because I have dementia. But it just kind of depends on every situation, but
Would have been great if we could have just said, yep, anesthesia is dangerous, or no, that would be fine. It depends, it really depends.
So another thing to bring up is you're talking about don't give up your mom or your dad. But on the other hand, when it's your husband and they still want to be loving and kissing and hugging, and you don't see them that way anymore because you're the caregiver.
Yeah.
It's very hard to want to be romantic with them when you don't see them that way anymore.
Yeah, tremendously stressful. You don't have to necessarily handle that one by yourself. I think talking it through with people who understand that is something we get calls about. Because it's so personal and, it's really. So there's a word that they all use in the Alzheimer world, and I do too. We call them care partners. And sometimes, and I get it, I understand why you don't want caregivers and care recipients, so it shows about imbalance of power and all that. And they'll say you're a care partner. The part that I will support about that is even someone who's very, very frail needs to be a partner in participating with you. So I get it. But I find a lot of spouses find the word care partner a bitter term. Saying, I've lost my partner. Why would pretending that he's a care partner? And sometimes that's where support groups come in, is you can start talking about this with other people who've been there. Or calling, like Memory Lane Care Services, and we just stay on the phone with you and talk it through. Or, it's this is such a rough disease, this whole dementia thing. Multi-layered, multi-elements.
and everybody handles it so differently. Everybody has different relationships, whether it's having mother, spouse, everybody has different experiences, and yeah, it's definitely challenging, and you always want to have some tricks up your sleeve, but sometimes it's just not everybody has the same support system. Some have very, very little, none. Others have multiple people they can talk to, so it's
Real important not to be alone though. Caregivers, I know I was talking to my talk about how isolated the person with dementia feels, but caregivers feel isolated. Caregivers can really feel alone.
Because we give up our life
You give up your life.
to be a caregiver.
Mhm.
I can remember calling my mother on my dad's birthdays. He'd been dead a number of few years, right? Today was Dan's birthday. She said, I hadn't thought about that. She says, "But I lost him years ago."
I lost him years ago. And so I'm reminded of the photograph that you carry with you.
I'll show you.
Okay.
You can see it in there.
I can see it, of happier times.
Yeah, he was the manager of a reggae band from which is a fun band. So experiences that I never had because, which I wasn't like jealous. But some folks have some fantastic events, even for high school graduation, and they have leaders come in and festivals and everything. So we did this and this was after he retired. And someone said to me recently, well, he should have got paid. No, they were his friends.
So some people cope with it, with, I've lost them, and you go through your grief and your mourning. Other people will remind themselves of old times. Other people take comfort from those days when their eyes came back and they, you know what I'm talking about? All of a sudden they're there. And I take that as a precious time. Different people handle it differently.
My, he went in early May, it was absolutely, I don't have a family. My son is not able to hold his autism and he's an only child. But when I first saw him sharing a room, it's like, it was brilliant man, you know, and then I had to realize it is what it is. And you can thank God for the care that he's able to get.
It was in our adult day center in Toledo that a woman had a similar experience. She brought in her husband and they were like youngish, you know, like late 60s, early 70s. And he's like really fit and beautiful, and she's really fit and beautiful, and he held a really responsible job, and she's held even more responsible jobs. And so they were used to being fit and beautiful. He needed to come to the day center. And she was really doubting, like, not my husband. He's so brilliant, and so fit and so beautiful. He doesn't need to be in the day center. And so he went in, and then she said, can I just like peek to see how he's doing? And because we don't encourage you to come in and spend the day with them. So I found a place where she could peek. She peeked at him and immediately burst into tears because he was so happy and he fit in, and he obviously does have dementia. And she just burst into tears to see him. Yeah, I guess she does have dementia. She eventually became one of our board members, so she didn't heal.
There's a question I have, is about the average age of those men who have dementia. Is it over 80? Pushing it? A common,
Specifically for men.
my husband, 89 years old.
Yeah, I don't know if there is a statistic like for women, men, you know, usually between 65 and 80 is. The number that I.
That's why it's built, especially in Portland. We've been 55 years.
When I see someone in their 70s, I'm not surprised, but I'm mildly startled, and I always think, "Ooh, I'm young for this." So mostly I'm meeting, but you're just talking about my little world.
Right.
Mostly I'm meeting people in their 80s.
And I know there's a statistic, 1 in 3 individuals over the age of 80 have a form of dementia.
Just say one of them.
1 in 3, you know, 1/3 of those over the age of over the age of 80.
Some people have mild dementia, some people have very severe dementia.
Some days worse than others. It doesn't,
Some days you said.
yeah.
There's fluctuating, and I thought you were going a different direction. Some people say that if you're very highly educated, like a lawyer or doctor or something, that you get it worse than other people. And that doesn't seem to be what's actually happening. So let me go back to the Alzheimer's dementia, not vascular others. If you get, my hands are a graph. And if you see someone with Alzheimer's, they tend to have a steady decline. And then end their life at a different place than they started. People with very high education, you'll frequently see them. Not so bad, 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 and then drop. And so you say, oh, they got it worse than someone with less education. But what's actually happening, remember I was talking about reserve capacity? They had so much reserve that they were, but even that magnificent brain couldn't hold on as the cells are all being destroyed. And so it looks like they got it worse, but everyone ended up here.
I've heard that too, like the higher education, but research shows if you do have that higher education, you can increase your likelihood of getting the disease, which is probably what that reserve, it kind of holds off a little bit longer. You're still gonna get it.
So learn new things, even if you aren't learning book learning, learn, I don't know, cabinetry or constantly learn.
And I did bring, we have this infographic, 10 healthy habits for your brain. So just some things to start doing or continue doing to decrease your likelihood. But that is on there.
I'm wondering if maybe it just doesn't appear to be worse with somebody that was really bright.
Yeah.
Expectations are different. We never expected people that are kind of average or below average to perform it. And when they can't do what everybody else could never do. We notice it. We notice it more. I thought that with my dad. He didn't finish 8th grade, but he used to give me the answers to the extra credit algebra problems when I was stuck. And I ended up being a math major and a physics minor in Iowa State Teachers College. I never did figure out how he figured out. How he gave me the answers. And he couldn't understand why other people couldn't do that.
And your family also gave you some genes.
And he played cards with the other farmers when he wasn't working in the field or busy. I'm sure they played for money, not a lot of money, but probably none of them could afford to lose. But I'm sure he won or winner after he got dementia with Parkinson's and how much was the disease and how much was the medication, who knows? But Mom shared that he quit going to the town and play, which was good because he realized he couldn't win. He couldn't win on the time.
And the brain is really remarkable too. Like I've definitely known people in their late 80s. Enough dementia that they should not be living on their own, who are brilliant bridge players. Like, what's that all? The brain is just a remarkable thing.
And when you were telling the first part about people misplacing things, thinking they've been stolen, I think of my dad's cousin who Mom told me she was deaf from childhood, probably from measles or something. And my brother, an audiologist, had fit her with hearing aids at one point, and it scared her because when she picked up the phone, it made a noise. She'd never heard dial tone. I mean, it was like, it had been number please dates, before there was a dial tone. The world scared her, so she didn't want the hearing aids, right? Yeah. But she couldn't hear the phone, she couldn't hear the door. Now, Mom would, try to keep her. And Mary swore that the neighbors came in and took her coat down, put a pillow on her couch. And the Mom would argue with her. She just, hey, whatever.
I guess
But then they came back and they put it back, but they put it behind the couch.
Oh, yeah. Was her reasoning. I have a question. We know that people who have hearing loss are more likely to suffer dementia. It seems to have something to do with you aren't using your brain, at least parts of your brain. And that people with hearing loss can often feel socially very isolated and alone. I've heard, and I don't know how to get my head around this, so I'm going to ask you, that hearing loss is more difficult to bear than vision loss. What do you think? would you find it harder to lose your hearing or your vision?
I have hearing loss. And I think it'd be worse to lose my vision. I think. Hearing loss. You can still see what's going on and I think it would be. Harder to lose your vision.
Harder to lose your vision. That's kind of where I'm going to.
I've heard that when you lose your hearing, you disconnect from people. When you lose your sight, you disconnect from things.
Oh,
I don't know if it's true.
no, that's almost medical.
I just bought a birthday card for my sister and it says, we've reached the age, and you open it up. That when you're driving, you have to turn the radio down so you can see. The radio, I usually listen to talk radio, so I'm listening, there's turn that down, I can't see where I'm going.
And it's true, it's strange, I worked for the phone company in Arizona. When in the 1980s mostly, it's like, we talked to the winter visitors from northern USA and Canada and stuff twice a year when they were connecting phones and disconnecting them or whatever like that. But APS, the local electric company, had an event to, they were offering it free to service reps, and they went, and they had us, well, they had glasses that had clear name for to mimic cataracts. And so they said Vaseline worked better, it's messier, but you know, and then had us try to read a electric meter and write a check. And I realized my ears were ringing. I could not hear as well at the same time. There wasn't anything wrong with my ears since I was 8, but it's like, you know, corrected, right? You know, it's all connected.
I can't necessarily come up with an answer for that one, that your hearing is disturbed by not being able to see, but the seeing, I need to turn down. That one makes sense to me, because when we were talking about how it's more difficult to process as you get older, one brain cell connects to the next. And so you're already having trouble processing just by being over 45 or 60. If you're going to be further distracted with noise, now I can't see. It's not that you can't see, you can't process. I can't even figure out what lane I'm in. I can't even figure this out with that noise going on. It's the reverse. I'm more puzzled by. I don't have a theory on that.
And they were saying, you know, like slow down with the older customers, right? And they said because they have more stuff to sort through, that it takes them longer to make a decision, but they make better decisions.
Yes, there's something called wisdom. The researchers have given like college age students, they're always experimenting on people who go to college because they're easy, you've got access to them. So they did college age students and people over 70 and gave them a task, go out and rent an apartment. And as you can imagine, the young students, they were processing really fast and they learn real fast and all that kind of stuff. But the older had experience, life experience, and they were able to figure out, and they actually came up with that. But yes, there's something called wisdom with age. So our brains are definitely slower. We think slower, we hear slower, we process slower. You have to have things repeated to you many, many times. But those are the students in the classroom who have A's. The older students who are over 65, they get all the A's because they're able to take all the things they knew. So I was doing research on a woman who, a single person research, and her goal was she wanted to graduate from college by the time she was 70. And she had all these things about unfinished business, because she put 4 kids through school, and every time she went to school, she had to drop out, and it was a whole interesting study. But she was talking about taking an art class, art appreciation class. And there was a Andy Warhol picture, and there was Jackie O wearing a pillbox hat. She knew what that was, right? We all know why Jackie O was wearing a pillbox hat and exactly what day that was. But the instructor, who was only in his 30s, didn't know that that was an assassination picture, and the students certainly didn't know that was an assassination picture, but from her knowledge, the older adults know a lot of things, we're just slower. But we've got lots and lots of experiences to sift through. I think that's the word you used, to sift through to make sense out of what we're looking at. So our time is up. Thank you, you've all been delightful. I know I was a last minute replacement, so thank you for welcoming me and letting me come.
Thank you.